Hey everyone, TJ Hernandez here, and I'm the founder of RosterCoach.com, a classroom-style video-based website that's designed to help you improve your daily fantasy sports game. Today's preview is a lesson on how to use Vegas lines to help you find defenses to build your lineups around when playing NFL DFS. If you like this video, please like and share it, and don't forget to leave a comment below.
I wanted to start again with this correlation matrix. I discussed how this graphic works and how to read it on my previous video, so be sure to go back to part 3 if you're having any difficulty viewing the graphic. Our main item of focus here is going to be that DST group in the bottom left corner. If we look up to where it says YQB1, you can see that there's a negative 0.46 correlation. That's a strong inverse relationship, and it tells us that our DST is going to score more points when the opposing quarterback is scoring less. That's obviously intuitive, but if we want to bring that back to part 1 of this course, remember again, quarterbacks that we want to target based on Vegas are going to be those that are favored in high total games. So the obvious conclusion for that, for defenses, is that we want to target DSTs that are favored in low total games. You can very simply find some DST options every week just by looking at quarterbacks to target based on Vegas. As I've done here throughout the course, I wanted to verify some of our assumptions using the trends tool over at Fantasy Labs. And I think that what I found out is actually going to be pretty interesting. If we look up here at the chart on the top left, we can see that I separated fantasy scoring for DSTs based on total. And we can see that there actually isn't that much of a relationship between game total and fantasy scoring. I think that a lot of times when we're looking for defenses, we're generally targeting defenses that are playing in low total games. But you can see here that fantasy scoring, with the exception of the extreme high projected total, is actually fairly evenly distributed. Already you can see that we're getting some pushback to what's a pretty commonly populated misnomer. If we look over here to the right, we can see that I have DST scoring separated by a spread. And here we have what I would consider to be a really strong relationship. The more a team is favored by, the more fantasy points that DST is going to score. And that relationship seems pretty strong throughout. Obviously, we have a pretty small sample size here at the top. But even with the next few groups, you can see that the scoring is significantly higher for teams that are favored and strongly favored than those that are underdogs. So I think that just on the surface, we really want to be looking more at teams that are heavily favored when looking at DST than we do for total. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, your DST is going to score points by holding the opposing team to less points, but those differences in scoring are pretty small unless you're going to record a shutout, which I don't really think is something that you want to predict. Really, where you're going to accumulate a lot of your fantasy scoring is through sacks and through turnovers. And as we talked about earlier with quarterbacks, if you're leading in a game, the opposing team is going to be forced to throw more. That obviously leads to more sacks, and in most cases will also lead to more turnovers, particularly interceptions. So I think that if you're in one of those situations where there's a small favorite in a low total game and a big favorite in a high total game, I think you're actually better off choosing the big favorite, even though the total is probably a lot higher. This last table on the bottom left just kind of reinforces these ideas, but I also think it brings up some interesting things that you're going to see written about most weeks by DFS touts. So if you look, the average amount of points scored over the last 2 seasons for a DST was 7.59 DK points. And we can see again right below, there's obviously a huge disparity between being the favorite in a game and being an underdog. But I also wanted to address the idea of home road splits. I know that's not exactly a Vegas concept, but something that I think is important. Fantasy scoring for DSTs, whether you're home or away, really isn't that different. And I think a lot of times when people are talking about defenses to target, they're mentioning, oh, you want a home team. Presumably this is, for some advantage with the crowd or some other home advantage that I think people generally accept exists in football. But we can see that that doesn't really bear out in fantasy scoring. And in fact, even if we look at home favorites, we can see that the fantasy scoring on average is minuscule over what a normal favorite is going to score, whether they're on the road or at home. So again, in general, all this is really just reinforcing that we want favorites and we want big favorites when we're targeting our DSTs.